So without further ado, let's just start with today's topic. And we are going to start with a new chapter, and that is geothermics. I hope you can see my screen and you can hear me clearly. So, as the name suggests, geothermics, it deals with heat and temperature, right? So far we have talked about some of the natural laws. We have talked about gravity. We also have talked about magnetism. So heat and temperature is the way heat and temperature works is very different from all the natural laws that we have discussed, right? So, so in this particular case, the Newtonian mechanics, which is traditionally used for describing gravity, is applied to 10 to the power 24 molecules or atoms. It's a large number of large number of molecules or atoms that we are going to look at, because it's the cumulative effect of everything while heat is provided to the system is studied, right? So hence we also think about, in case of gas or in case of liquid, we think about the Brownian motion of movement, right? And hence as the motion of particles in case of heat transfer is Brownian, you have to kind of think of a statistical average of the motion that happens within, say, for example, in a gas molecule, right? So but we have discovered that in thermal or chemical equilibrium, thermodynamic averages of many particle system is well defined. Yeah, that is good for us. I mean, those statistical things, the statistical averages are fairly well defined. So the macroscopic averages like temperature, heat content are defined by simple equations. Okay. So although so if you have a system on which you are experimenting with heat, right? You are either adding heat or you are subtracting heat from there. As a result, the heat content and the temperature is changing in the system, right? Now, if you look at it in a very individual molecule or atom level, the phenomena is extremely complex. Yeah, it's extremely complex how it is manifested at an individual grain scale. But then the average of them is kind of simple and kind of measurable. Yeah. And their manifestation hence are also fairly simple, like temperature, heat content, and hence you can describe them. Someone had a question?
No, sir, thanks.
Okay. So the heat content and temperature hence can be expressed with very simple uh, equations, right? So once this is a very important but very simple but very important and very methodical diagram to remember. Okay, so if you think about the energy can be broadly subdivided into potential energy and kinetic energy. Potential energy is the major component of chemical energy, which is stored in the chemical bonds and released or absorbed by chemical reactions. Okay. Similarly, kinetic energy, which is the major component of thermal energy, consists of random molecular motions, which we call as Brownian motion, right? So energy is conserved or it is transferred. Now, transferred by two processes. One is by heat transfer, another by doing work. Okay. There is a beautiful relationship between heat and work. I think you have all read these things in your high school physics. So I will, give you a little bit of flavor of what you have already read, and then we will get into our actual business. Okay. So heat can only be partially converted to work. You have already read that, but work can be completely converted to heat. Okay. Now, heat is defined as the transfer due to the difference in temperature. Okay. So if there is a temperature gradient between two connected bodies, heat will transfer. You know about that. Okay. And heat is related to heat capacity. Heat capacity essentially relates heat to temperature, right? Now, temperature is expressed by some arbitrary scale. Most commonly used scales are Celsius, Kelvin, or Fahrenheit. You know what is Celsius. You know the relationship between Celsius and Fahrenheit, I'm sure. What is the relationship between Celsius and Fahrenheit? Can someone tell me? What is the relationship between Celsius and Fahrenheit? Come on, speak up. C by 5 is equals to F minus 32 by 9, where C is temperature expressed in centigrade, F is temperature expressed in Fahrenheit, right? C by 5 is equals to F minus 32 by 9, right? Similarly, Celsius and Kelvin scale is also related. Minus 273 degrees centigrade is equals to how many Kelvin? Hello, are you guys there or not?
Yes, sir.
So how minus 273 degrees centigrade is equals to how much Kelvin?
0 Kelvin.
Yes. So it's defined by a 0 point and then magnitude of degree. You know, that is how the temperature increase is measured, right? So measured by observable effect, temperature is measured by observable effect on physical property of a substance. Okay, if you increase the temperature in a thermometer, what happens? The mercury expands, right? So it's the expansion of the mercury which is used as a measure of temperature increase, right? So it's the observable effect of a physical property of a substance, right? Now, energy is measured by its effect on matter that loses or gains or possesses it, and is expressed on a scale whose 0 point is arbitrarily set, with a consequence that only change in energy can be observed, right? So you know more or less this whole diagram, but it kind of briefs you about how energy is related to thermal energy and temperature and heat and work and how they are measured. But I think this is a beautiful chart to actually kind of keep in your mind. So, of course, when we talk about geothermics, the temperature system of the Earth, so geothermics means we are going to discuss about the implications of the temperature system in the Earth or the heat system in the Earth. Okay, and to do that, we need to know about the thermodynamic laws. Okay, so the 0th law of thermodynamics, what does that say? So the 0th law says when two objects are separately in thermodynamic equilibrium with a third object, they are in equilibrium with each other. Okay, so what does that mean? So if I have, there is this object 1, there is object 2 and object 3. If we say that object 2 and object 1 is in thermodynamic equilibrium, and what does thermodynamic equilibrium means? Can someone tell me what does thermodynamic equilibrium means?
The temperature difference is constant.
So there is no temperature difference, but more fundamentally, there is no heat transfer going on, right? So there is no heat transferred between object 1 to object 2, or there is no heat transferred from object 2 to object 1. Okay, there is no heat exchange, if you like. Okay, and that is how we call them. They are being at thermodynamic equilibrium. Okay, so if that thing happens, if we say that object 1 and that is only possible if the temperature is the same for object 1 and object 2. If the temperature is same, only then there will be no thermodynamic, there will be no heat exchange, right? And hence the thermodynamic equilibrium will be established. So if object 1 and object 2 are in thermodynamic equilibrium, similarly object 1 and object 3 are in thermodynamic equilibrium, and if these all three objects are connected, we can obviously say that object 2 and object 3 are also in thermodynamic equilibrium. Okay. Now, if the thermodynamic equilibrium is hindered, that means, suppose if we keep increasing the temperature of object 1, what we will find that there will be heat exchange. Okay, the heat will flow from object 1 to object 2. Okay, and what is the first law of thermodynamics? The first law of thermodynamics is the application of the conservation of energy. Is the application of the conservation of energy principle to heat and thermodynamic processes. So what it says, that the change in internal energy of a system is equal to the heat added to the system minus the work done by the system. Okay, so if the change in internal energy is delta U, then it is equals to the heat added to the system Q minus W, which is the work done by the system. Okay, so it is as if there is no work done by the system, then all the heat that you add to the system is gone to the change in internal energy. If you can restrict the work done by the system, okay, then all the heat that you add is transferred into the internal energy change. Okay, so that means the Brownian motion actually gets much more random, much more faster. Okay, that is essentially the change in internal energy. So I have a gas. So suppose, for example, I have a piston which is filled with gas. Okay, you know how a piston looks like. I have a piston which is filled with gas. Then I add some temperature to the system, to this piston. Okay, and what I will see, because of the expansion of the gas, the piston will move a little bit. Okay, the piston will move. Now the movement of the piston is the work done by the system. Okay, movement of the piston is work done by the system. Now and then of course the Brownian motion of the gas also increases, right? So that is the change in internal energy. Now what we can do mechanically, we can stop that piston from getting expanded, getting pushed. So we can restrict that expansion. We can stop that gas being expanded, even if we are increasing the temperature. So then what will happen? My Brownian motion of the gas will even increase, right? So the internal energy of the gas will increase further, because the system doesn't have to do any work. Is it clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So the internal energy involves the energy of microscopic scale. As we said that this involves the Brownian motion, right? So for an ideal monochromatic gas means the gas which follows Charles and Bowell's law completely, So for an ideal monochromatic gas, this is just the translational kinetic energy or the linear motion of the hard sphere atoms, and the behavior of the system is well deserved by kinetic theory. Okay, however, if the gas is polyatomic, that means if you have more than one atom of gases more than one type of atoms in the system, then you will have rotational and vibrational kinetic energy as well. Okay, then in case of liquid and solid, there is also potential energy associated with the intermolecular attractive forces. Okay, so a simple visualization of the contribution of the internal energy can be helpful in understanding the phase transition and other phenomena which involves internal energy. Okay, so the internal energy part that we have talked about, in case of an ideal gas, in a monoatomic ideal gas, it is only the translational kinetic energy of the atoms. Okay, the atoms are only gets translated. In case of a actual natural gas, real gas, which is polyatomic. You have more than one dimensions of atoms. So you will have vibrational and kinetic energy, vibrational and rotational energy as well. Okay. In case of a solid or a liquid, you will have the translational kinetic energy, vibrational and rotational kinetic energy, plus there will be a change in the potential energy as well, right? So what is work? Work is essentially force multiplied by the distance moved in the force direction. Okay, so this is essentially so say for example, I have a small block. I am applying a force P, and then along the direction of P, the object actually moves a distance A. Then the work is PA. Okay, so in case of gas, it can be expressed as applied pressure by displaced volume. Okay, the unit of work is essentially joule. Joule is equals to 1 Newton meter, because Newton is the unit of force and meter is the unit of distance, right? Now, if we think about the Earth system, what we are looking at a solid Earth, you know, we are looking at liquid ocean, and we are looking at gaseous atmosphere. Okay, and if we think that these are all my heat engines, okay, so there will be very different sort of heat kinematics going on in them. Okay, very different sort of heat kinematics going on in them, and we are going to study them into bit more details, of course. And we will see that all these systems, the solid Earth, the liquid ocean, and the gaseous atmosphere, okay, everything is kind of in thermal disequilibrium. So this thermal disequilibrium, we will see that is the fundamental for all the processes that happens in the Earth. Okay, if this thermal disequilibrium would not have been here, okay, we will see that the Earth would have ceased to exist. Okay, all the beautiful things that happens in the Earth, including the formation of life, you know, that depends on this thermal disequilibrium. Okay, so in case of solid Earth, the solid Earth that you already know about, it has a very hot bottom. The core is extremely hot. You know, mantle is hotter. Mantle is hotter than the crust. Core is hotter than the mantle. You know, so you have a hot bottom, and then you have a cold top. The top of the crust is not that hot. It's like 20 degrees centigrade. That's why we can stay there, right? So you know, so you have heat transfer through this solid. You also heat transfer through the liquid, because the mantle is liquid, the outer core is liquid at the time scale of heat transfer. Okay, we know there is liquid ocean. Okay, it's hot at the equator, cold at the poles, and that is one of the reasons that's why you have these beautiful ocean currents, right? And you also have the hot, gaseous atmosphere. Okay, and because you know by now that the as we move from the surface of the Earth above, the temperature of the atmosphere slowly decreases. There is a temperature profile, of course. There is a slight increase and decrease and all that sort. I'm so sorry. I was keeping on speaking. Let's see how far you have. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
I'm so sorry. I even did not realize that that is lost. How far you have did you
And no, sir. Temperature profile we were speaking.
hear
Before that,
this one?
no, sir. Atmospheric temperature profile we were speaking.
Atmospheric temperature. This one, right?
No, sir.
This
It's
is
like
where
work you are explaining after that one.
which slide I was. This slide?
No, sir.
This slide I have talked about already.
Uh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. After that,
And this slide? This slide I have talked about or not?
No, sir.
Hello? No, oh, you did not hear this slide. Okay. All right. So let's begin from here. All right. So this is a very nice example. What you can see here, that this is a piston, as you can see, and this piston is filled with gas. And suppose the initial temperature of this piston is 100 degrees centigrade. Okay. Now what I'm doing here, I am applying some force F, and as a result, the piston is moving at a distance d. Okay, and this is the final state. Now, as I have done this work, what I can see that the temperature is increased by 200 degrees centigrade. Okay, so now the final temperature is 200 degrees centigrade. So I can express the work done as equals to F multiplied by d, and then I can simplify the equation as P delta V. Okay, where P is pressure, delta V is the change in volume, right? Now, I can also achieve this increase in temperature by simply heating the system. Okay, here I have not heated the system. What I have done, I have just done some work, right? And the system is heated. The temperature is increased. Simple, but I can increase the temperature as well by heating the system just by putting a Bunsen burner here. Now, if I am here, I am with a piston with a 200 degrees centigrade, and I know the initial temperature was 100 degrees centigrade. There is no way I can say whether it was done by increasing in temperature or it was done by, you know, by doing some work. Okay, that cannot be predicted. Okay. Now, what I was saying, that if two systems are in thermal disequilibrium, the heat will be exchanged. Okay, and the difference in Q in, that is the temperature, heat in by the temperature heat out, you can actually establish a heat engine. Okay, a heat engine, what a heat engine will do, it will use this thermal disequilibrium to do some mechanical work, right? So that this particular heat engine is there everywhere in our Earth system, and that is what we are going to see here. So you can see here that this is the atmospheric heat engine, if you like, that there is a temperature difference from the equator to the pole. Okay, at the equator it is extremely hot, and if we are moving towards the pole, it becomes gradually colder, and at the pole it is very, very cold, right? So there is a thermal disequilibrium. So that thermal disequilibrium initiates the formation of several heat engines. For example, the wind actually blows, right? The wind blowing is a mechanical work, right? It's a mechanical work, and that is essentially attributed to the difference in temperature in the atmosphere, right? Similarly, the whole rainfall cycle, the whole rainfall cycle is typically associated. It's another heat engine, okay, and that is also associated with the difference in temperature from the ocean floor to the atmosphere. Okay. Now, the concept of heat engine is actually taken by human being and is converted to something called a steam engine. You can see here, this is an example, a classic example where heat energy is transferred into mechanical work. This was first done by James Watt. You all know the mechanics of how steam engine works. So here, heat energy is actually converted into mechanical work. Similarly, in case of a coal-fired power station, what is happening? The coal is burned, yeah, and coal is burnt, and that particular steam, that thermal energy is used to rotate your turbine, right? The turbine is rotated, and once the turbine is rotated, electricity is generated. Okay, so the heat energy is transferred into mechanical energy, and the mechanical energy into electrical energy, right? Similarly, it happens in case of a car engine. Now, there is something called Newton's cooling law that drives the heat engine, and that says dq dt, that is the change in thermal energy, is equals to h, small h, which is the heat transfer coefficient, multiplied by area of the area of the heat being transferred through which, the cross sectional area, and multiplied by the T environment minus Tt. T environment is the temperature of the environment, which is like the inherent temperature, minus the temperature of the object. Okay. So that essentially is the Newton's cooling law. Newton's cooling law is simply because it is thought that the temperature of the environment is kind of lower than the temperature of the object. Okay, that is how it is described. Okay, you can also think of it as heating as well. If the temperature of the object is lower than the temperature of the environment, of course the object will be heated, and if the object is hotter, the environment is cooler, the object will be cooled down. Okay, now if this is plotted, this kind of follows a asymptotic decrease, right? This is a very simple equation. Now, okay, so what does heat equation and what does heat flow equation conserve? So we also know, we have already talked briefly about this particular phenomena, that the change in internal energy of material within a volume during delta theta. Delta theta means the temperature increase. Okay, that is the temperature increase of delta theta, is equals to heat conducted during the heat conducted into volume during the temperature increase, minus heat conducted out during the change in temperature, and heat generated during the change in temperature. So I have a volume in which I am changing the temperature. Okay, so there will be a few things that would happen. Something, heat will come in. Okay, heat will go out, and then heat will be generated. Okay, and that would provide the total heat budget of the system. That is how it is described. Okay, now if we try to think about the heat flow, suppose I have one system which is cold, is at a temperature of T1, another system is hot with a temperature T2, and this is the interface. Okay, between T1 and T2, what I will see, that twice the thickness, half the heat flow. If this thing which is kind of a medium between T1 and T2, if the thickness of this medium increases, the heat flow decreases. Okay, half the area, half the heat flow. If this whole cross sectional area decreases, of course the heat flow also decreases. Different material, different heat flow. The heat capacity of this particular material is important. Okay? And then, of course, the double the temperature difference, double the heat flow. If the difference between T2 and T1 increases, the heat flow also increases. So this is how the heat flow is governed. And this is not important. Okay. Now, how heat is transferred? We all know about these three particular processes. One is conduction. Conduction means is a diffusion process, right? Conduction is diffusion of atomic vibrations at the atomic scale when there is a thermal gradient, and conduction can never be stopped except a perfect insulator is actually introduced. Okay, and conduction is a typical process of heat transfer through solid. Similarly, convection is a typical heat transfer mechanism through liquid. Okay, so what happens in convection? Convection is the movement of heat by material flow. In case of conduction, there is no material flow. It's only the vibration of the atoms that plays a role. In case of convection, of course, there is the movement of the material. Convection happens when thermal vibrations, thermal variation, there is a temperature difference, and of course, that introduces a buoyancy difference as well. Okay. You know that convection cycle actually is there in case of the Earth's mantle. Okay. And a rate of 10 centimeter per year of plate velocities that is being seen due to the convection cycle. So here is an example where the convection cycle is controlling so the heat disequilibrium is controlling the convection cycle. That means there is another thermal engine, and then because of that thermal engine, you also have the plate motion, right? Another mechanical thing going on. And radiation is the movement of heat as infrared electromagnetic waves, and hence can be propagated through free space or transparent substances, for example, vacuum, for example, space. Okay, so you all know about that. So here we are essentially interested about the heat flux. So heat flux is the rate of heat flow across an unit area. Okay, the rate of heat flow across an unit area, and that is expressed by joule per meter square per second. Okay, and flux is proportional to the density of the flow. Okay, and then flux varies by how the boundary surface with respect to the direction of the flow. If it is inclined, of course, the flux actually decreases, and flux is proportional to the area of the boundary. Okay, so here we are only interested about the heat flux. Now that brings us to something very important for us. Okay, and that is what we call as geothermal gradient. Geothermal gradient means how if we start from the surface, okay, and if we are going below, okay, how the temperature will increase. So here we see the temperature measured at 4 well bores. Okay, the well bores which are used for oil and gas extraction. Okay, what we see that the surface temperature is around 15 degrees centigrade, and then we see a geothermal gradient of 130 degrees centigrade per kilometer, okay, which is fairly steep. Okay. Now we also see another borehole, the temperature is 0. That means the surface temperature is almost 0. Okay, that can happen in polar region. Okay, and the heat gradient is around 62 degrees centigrade per kilometer. Okay. And then I see another case where the surface temperature is around 13 degrees centigrade, and the geothermal gradient is around 83.84 degrees centigrade. In another borehole, it's 74 degrees centigrade. Okay, so if I ask you to calculate the temperature at a particular depth, what you have to do? You have to use this equation. The T0 is the surface temperature plus the geothermal gradient into the depth. Okay, that would provide you the temperature at a particular depth. Okay. Now, the important takeaway point here is that the geothermal gradient varies from one place of the Earth to the other. Okay, the geothermal gradient is not really a constant value. The geothermal gradient varies, and that primarily dependent on how thick or thin the crust is. If the crust is very thick, the geothermal gradient is rather gentle, 30 degrees centigrade per kilometer. Okay, if I go one kilometer, I will see an increase of around 30 degrees centigrade. That is the normal geothermal gradient. If I have like a 30 kilometer 35 to 70 kilometer thick crust. Okay, but you know that the crust can be extremely thinner at places. Say at the mid-oceanic ridge, the crust is really, really thin. So that is where the asthenosphere is very close to the surface of the Earth. And if that happens, the geothermal gradient can exceptionally increase. Is that point clear, guys, to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the moral of the story is the geothermal gradient can vary really, really fast. Okay. And now you can see here how the temperature at 3 kilometer depth. So let's first see the heat flux. Okay. This is at the surface, and this is in the United States of America. That is where the heat flux is measured very well. Nowadays, we also have data for India, but I'm sorry, I don't have it right now. But you can get an idea. This is in the United States how the heat flux is. Heat flux is there. Okay. Similarly, the temperature at 3 kilometer depth, and you can see that how the temperature varies. And this variation in temperature is exclusively attributed to the geothermal gradient. At places you can see it's fairly very hot at 3 kilometer, 200 degrees centigrade and above. In cases it is very low. It's within 100 degrees centigrade, and that is attributed to the difference in geothermal gradient. Okay. So this particular heat disequilibrium is actually is responsible for various phenomena. Okay, you have these beautiful hydrothermal fields around. Okay, like the hot springs, the hydrothermal fields. We will talk about hydrothermal energy in detail in tomorrow's pre-recorded lecture. But you see that is fundamentally due to this heat disequilibrium. The oil and gas gets matured due to heat. The volcanoes erupt for heat disequilibrium. Earthquakes happen due to heat disequilibrium. Hydrothermal mineralization happens due to heat disequilibrium. Plate tectonics due to heat disequilibrium. Geothermal power production, we are going to discuss about it in tomorrow's pre-recorded lecture at details. The mid-oceanic regions, subducting zones, metamorphism of rocks, blah, blah, blah. Most of the natural phenomena has something to do with the heat disequilibrium that we observe. Okay. Now, this is an extremely important thing that I'm going to introduce here to you. Okay. I'll read it out for you and you will understand, because this is written in a very lucid language. So the Earth is hot. The core mantle boundary is at around 4000 degrees centigrade, and cold at surface, it's around 19 degrees centigrade at the top. And the space is very cold, minus 270 degrees centigrade. Okay. So what does that mean? That there is an inherent thermal disequilibrium. Okay. So there is a large temperature contrast, means that there is a thermal disequilibrium. And that means that the Earth must be transferring heat into the space. It has to, because it is hot and it is connected to the space. It has to actually transfer heat to the space. So what does that mean? If it transfers heat to the space, it is losing heat. The total heat of the Earth is kind of losing, is being lost. What are the processes by which the heat is being lost? The heat is being lost by conduction at the crust, by radiation from the crust to the space, and by convection in the mantle. Yeah, you understand my point. So why is the convection cycle present in the mantle? That is fundamentally because the Earth wants to lose its heat. The Earth wants to lose its heat because it is hotter than the space. It wants to lose its heat. Yeah, that is its fundamental right, if you say. It has to lose its heat and it has to come to the equilibrium to the space. So in next, if we go with the same cooling rate, yeah, so it was around 100 degrees centigrade per billion years at which Earth was losing its heat. Now, if we want to now equilibrate with this space, it will take around 10 billion years. Okay. So after 10 billion years, the Earth will be in equilibrium, heat equilibrium with this space. So when the Earth will be in heat equilibrium with this space, all these processes that is happening in the Earth will be stopped. Do you understand my point, everyone?
Yes, sir.
All these processes that is happening in the Earth will stop, starting from plate tectonics to the movement of wind to the ocean, everything, whatever is there, everything will be stopped. Our Earth will be dead. So to have this Earth the way it is, to being of the Earth the way it is, having the plate tectonics, having the ocean current, having the wind blowing, having this temperature inhabitable for life, everything is attributed to this one particular fundamental thing, that is heat disequilibrium. Does it make sense, guys? Do you understand this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So once this heat disequilibrium is lost, the Earth will be dead. Yeah, is that clear? Now you understand why plate tectonics happens. Simply because there is this, it wants to release heat. Why and how would it release it in liquid? It has to have this convection cycle, and this convection cycle will actually form a heat engine, and that heat engine would essentially reinforce the process of plate tectonics. Understand my point? So we talked about this conduction, convection, and radiation. Now, so this is all. This is also, you have seen the radiative heat flux in the planet Earth. Now, one thing I want to focus here, that the geothermal gradient can be of two types. Yeah, up to the crust. Okay, up to the let us say till the lithosphere. Okay, not crust. You can call all the way up to the lithosphere, or simply up to the crust. It has a conductive geotherm. Conductive geotherm is around 30 degrees centigrade per kilometer. Okay, this is the conductive geotherm. This is somewhere the Moho is. Okay, so after the Moho, it is called the adiabatic geotherm. Adiabatic geotherm is 0.3 to 0.5 degrees centigrade per kilometer. So you can see that here the heat is very much constant. The temperature is very much constant. The temperature increases, but increases very slowly. Okay? It is as if the heat, the whole thing is so much compressed. The whole thing is at a so much higher pressure, that as if that there is like the packet of heats there, without any practical temperature gradient. So there is temperature gradient, but the temperature gradient is extremely low, 0.3 to 0.5 degrees centigrade. Now, if I ask you that you calculate the temperature at 50 kilometers from the Earth, from the surface, okay? And I say that the Moho is at 35 kilometers. So till 35 kilometers, you have to use the conductive geotherm, and from 35 kilometers to rest of the 15 kilometers, you have to use the adiabatic geotherm. Okay, and then you have to add the surface temperature. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
So it's important to remember that there are two types of geotherms, and the geotherms vary a lot, right? As you have just established. Okay, so this is another way of putting how the geotherms essentially change. You can see here that at places this is fairly steep, at places this is fairly gentle, and all sorts of different things that happen simply because of many different parameters, which we will discuss in tomorrow's and the implication of such variation geothermal gradients we will discuss in tomorrow's pre-recorded lecture. All right, I think we are more or less done. Okay, you can see here this is the lithosphere and this is the asthenosphere, and how the temperature is kind of varying. This is a very thin crust, and you can see that there is this beautiful geothermal gradient, that is the conductive geothermal gradient in the adiabatic geothermal gradient. You can see here, depending on the thickness of the lithosphere, how the temperature profiles are actually changing. Okay. So I will stop the lecture here and I will invite you for any question that you might have on the fundamentals of geothermics. So in tomorrow's class, what I will do, I will upload. Tomorrow we have a big meeting actually, a department-wise review. So unfortunately, I will not be able to take a live class. But what I will do, I will upload the lecture. On Friday, we will have a live class, and on that I will solve any doubt that you might have. Okay, and that will be the last class for this course. Okay, and then next week we will have a quiz. And then you are free. We will see each other again on during your end sem exam. When is your end sem exam? Hello?
Sir, it's after 22 of November.
20. So you have plenty of time. You can relax, enjoy whatever it is. But the syllabus will be done. Okay? So tomorrow I will upload a lecture. If you have any question right now, please ask.
So, is there any planet which has already achieved that thermal equilibrium
You tell me.
in the space?
You tell me. Find out that.
Yes, sir.
Find that out. That's a very interesting question. But it will open a lot of possibilities while if you read that particular topic, okay? And it is very, very controversial as well. Okay. So most of the planets are in kind of equilibrium. Many of them, it is thought, at least they are dead. So even if they are not at thermal complete equilibrium, the temperature gradient is not sufficient enough to have atmosphere, to have plate tectonics. You understand my point?
Yeah, yes, sir. So, means
So
along with
find that answer out. This is
Yes, sir,
there
yes.
is not a simple answer to it. Is there plate tectonics on Moon? Is there plate tectonics on Mars? What do you think? It's a very, very interesting topic to investigate. Yeah, Pritam.
Yes, sir.
As you have asked the question, I want you to investigate.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I will give you some hints. As you have just talked about it. Mars does have some signatures of ancient plate tectonics. On the Martian surface, on Moon surface, people do see beautiful faults and everything. Now, whether they are faults or not, who knows? Nobody has gone to the Mars, right? It's only the satellite images that you can analyze.
Yes.
Yeah, but then class. But then but there is signature. That means there was perhaps sometimes some plate tectonics. But now, right now, even if it is not in complete equilibrium, this is the answer. Most of the planets except the Earth, doesn't have that. It's not the thermal disequilibrium is not at a scale at which such processes can work. Okay. Does it answer your question?
Yes, sir. Means like we don't see any plate tectonics activities now in Mars, but
Exactly.
there were some signatures.
Perhaps.
So, sir, can we conclude that if the thermal equilibrium is achieved, then the planet is completely dead? Like there may
Yeah,
be...
absolutely. Absolutely. That is no doubt.
Okay, sir.
It doesn't have to even achieve the full thermal equilibrium. It loses significant amount of heat, it is dead. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Okay, all right then. I will upload a lecture tomorrow, and we will see you on Friday. And on Friday, please prepare for all the questions that you might have, not only on this subject but on the whole course. If you have anything that you want to discuss, that will be your chance. Okay. Otherwise, also you can write emails and everything. You can call me. You can drop by here at my office. Anything is possible. But it's the formal session where I can also address any other doubt that you might have. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Bye.